Thank you, members. Thank you, Giri, Puja, and the team for joining the call. Ravi B. Raghavan, President, Madras Chapter. On behalf of the Madras Chapter, welcome once again. Friday evening. Sorry I did this today, but this topic has been in my breaking of the mind because of this nature of the topic and the way things are evolving and using a lot of corporate issues and various other things happening around us. So I thought maybe look at this topic, and there have been a lot of questions on this topic, and there's a lot of misconceptions about culture audit. So I'll just start off with the two or three things before I introduce Giri and Puja. Thanks once again, Giri and Puja, for joining. Uh, on culture audit, there's been perceptions thinking it's mainly on diversity, etc., etc., and these are wrong misconceptions which been coming through. So when we go through some of these topics, and Giri and Puja will talk on, you will come to know that there is hard controls and soft controls as well. And one of the hard controls is what we talk on typical internal audit processes of risk control matrix. But the soft controls we generally don't mention. And this is where culture and governance and conduct comes in. And culture and conduct goes together. And one of the basic things on conduct of the organization and the culture going with it, and then the behavior related to it. So it's a very unique topic. It is not related to any specific area, and there are various angles to it, and it's a very complex methodology also to be followed. It's not a straightforward audit technique we have to use, and there are various modelings and deliverables. So thanks once again, and a brief introduction about Madras chapter. Quite a few sessions we've been running, and we've been having a very good audience today. Also, the attendance should be really picking up. But this is a very niche topic today. A lot of organizations, board members are also very interested. And the real issues which come about, which in my practical way, we see a lot of frauds happening or risks happening, is because this culture needs to be imbibed into the system and taken forward. So here I'll stop for introduction of Giri. And Giri comes from a background of, he's been in the system for some time, and he's a certified internal auditor with 18 years of experience. He's ISO certified as well, and industry experience across telecom, wireless, and manufacturing. And he's a professional from Big Four as well, and right now in his own practice. GRC controls risk processes. So thanks once again, Giri, on this very, very interesting topic. And it's been very dear to me, and Giri volunteered to talk on this topic, which is again, a lot of questions might come. Whatever we can, we will answer it. And but there are methodologies and internal audit techniques to be followed, which we will try to briefly touch upon. But then whatever we can do in the next 2 hours, we will try. But there are a lot of questions come up. We'll be happy to take follow-up sessions, also training. And a lot of training might be required in this area. And this is also becoming a lot of questions. Somebody gets confused, it's forensics or not. It's not forensics. It is pure internal audit methodology. But it's a very, very soft methodology because you're going to touch on ethics, integrity, and various other factors. So thanks, Giri, once again. And I have Puja also. Thanks, Puja, for joining from the industry side. She's a certified auditor, chartered accountant with over 20 years of experience. She heads one of the big financial institutions as Vice President Financial Oversight and Compliance. And she will get the industry background. We thought maybe to invite Puja again to get an industry experience and to see how best we can make this session interesting. So thanks once again, and stay patient. Any questions, you can put it on the chat. We'll take the questions at the end around 7:45 when we plan to close the session. All yours, Giri, and thanks once again. And it's a very interesting topic, and also I expect a lot of questions to come. Whatever we can do, we will do it. But if they're going to offline questions, please post it on the chat or on the website. We will be happy to take it. This is under recording, all session. This whole session is under recording. So keep the questions very clear and simple. And if it's going to be any political question, because this is a very political topic as well, how to manage it. Keep it very simple so that we can address all the audience questions. Thank you, Giri. All yours.
Thanks, Ravi, for giving me this opportunity. And really, this is a topic that is a lot of enthusiasm in kind of talking about this topic, and kind of it's a little different from the routine that we do about internal audit topics, which are process oriented. This is much higher at a, at a strategic level and organizational level. So thanks for giving this opportunity. And hi, Puja, nice to meet you. And thanks for being the co-host of this panel, as well as we'll do some fireside chat a little later. And, kind of, we'll make this session a lot more interactive. I think there's a lot happening on the culture side from an organization perspective. So let me share my screen. I'll take everyone through a couple of slides. But really, the essence of this whole discussion or the webinar is to kind of take back a few things and incorporate it into your day-to-day audit framework of operations, and see how we can bring into fore a cultural audit that has been quite neglected as such, because the survey says it all. I'll show you some of the survey polls and what they say about culture audit and how important it is, and how little that internal audit has done in this space. Nevertheless, so let me just share my screen. Uh, So essentially, the agenda, I would like to cover it in this manner, uh, typically to kind of give a holistic understanding of what a culture is as per IIA, and give a few pointers around what culture means to different set of organizational, functions and departments and roles and responsibilities. What do they think culture is all about? And what is the business significance of culture, and kind of why it is so important to set the tone, to set the culture right, and things like that. And I would also like to kind of talk about a few cultural variants, as I call it. There are variant cultural styles. Culture is again a style, a behavior, a belief, a system. So I would like to touch upon a few cultures that are prevalent. Then what is the mandate? What is culture audit? Who gives the mandate for culture audit? And how do we undertake a culture audit? And some operational aspect about auditing a culture, and what are the frameworks available for such audits, and how do we undertake such audits? And finally, a Q&A session. We'll open it up. You can kind of feel free to kind of make this interactive, ask any questions that you might have. I'm a bit handicapped to see that we couldn't adjust it so that I can't see the chat questions right away, but I have asked Saranam to help me read out any chat questions that may come up, and we'll take it up as it comes. We'll make it interactive, and this would have been a a fantastic session if it were a physical face-to-face session, but we are limited by choice. So this is a webinar session, and I cannot see the reactions, but I'm happy to kind of take questions and answer any that you might have. So broad definition of culture as per IIA, the organizational culture typically is it's believed to be invisible in terms of the belief systems, the values, the norms and preferences of individuals that form an organization, right? I mean, there are different belief systems that each the whole organization is a large setup, and a large organizations have different pockets of organizational setup and culture that to bring that into one cohesive belief systems and values and norms, it takes a lot. And these are preferences of individual. It flows from top to bottom, and from bottom to up. This is a two-way process. If you look at some of the large organizations and large leaders, this flows in both ways, and cultures are set up by cultures are kind of established. It's sometimes it is not spoken of, but then you can feel it that this is a very good, strong cultural organizations. As well as there are some organizations, when you are newly recruited and you enter the organization, that probably you made a wrong choice. So these are systems, processes, norms, values, behaviors of individuals around you and of the organization, which get shaped over time. And definitely there is one component of, they also define the conduct. Conduct is actually a tangible manifestation of culture through behavior, through actions, behaviors, and decisions of these individuals, right? So culture leads to understanding. The understanding and connection between culture and conduct is very important. As we learn, culture is an underlying driver of the conduct, and conduct is an observable outcome of culture. So I will touch upon various frameworks that talks about this in various forms. I've been a lead trainer for COSO for some time for IIA India. So it's one of my favorite topics of a culture which is built into the COSO framework as well. I'd just like to touch upon that. It gets delivered in various forms today. Internal auditors and statutory auditors are all looking at culture in some form of assessments. Whenever a new customer is being onboarded by a large audit firm, they have to do certain assessments. They sit with the CEO and the board of directors and do some assessment on culture. And these are set in terms of entity level controls that they assess, and kind of the hierarchies they understand, the cultures, the geographies, the people. So there are a lot of questionnaires that are built around this, but these are softer aspects of culture that we look at, and look at certain tangible supporting materials to say that, okay, this is what we can conclude, and we can take this as an as a customer or a client. So similarly, we do this assessment in some form in larger SOX exercise, in larger IFC exercise across many organizations which are required to which are mandated and required to comply with some of these regulatory requirements. So let me move on and kind of take you to why, what is the business significance of, before I touch upon anything to do with an audit of a culture, I think it's very important that we all come to a same page of understanding of what culture really means to the business, and is it a business driver? Is it a business, is it important for the business, and how important is the culture for the business? So this is a very old saying by the management guru Peter Drucker, who said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Now, this saying, I'm sure you would have all heard many times. If you are in your 40s, and if you are in probably 35s and 40s and 50s, you would have heard this many times. These are textbook materials that we read. This essentially, if you look at this one particular statement, it talks volumes in terms of how culture is so important. So it's essentially means that, if the necessary foundation of culture is not there in any organization, it could easily break your strategy, and your plans and strategies have very little chance of being achieved, because then there's no culture built around achieving those strategies. So this essentially means that. So let me just. I would like to do some polls, and try to get a sense of. There are more than 50, 60 participants, and this the polls will essentially help me understand what you think about some of the aspects of culture. So one of the first poll that I would like to run is to kind of understand what do you think about having a strong culture. So let me run that poll, and then I will continue with the next slide. So Sharanan, would you like to do that, or I can run it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me just launch it. Yeah, I just launched this question about a strong culture is a common denominator among most successful companies. I appreciate if you could respond to this. Let me understand what you think about culture being a very strong denominator among most successful companies. And if you think otherwise, if you're not sure, we'll be happy to know that as well. Please respond one way or the other. So it will help us to kind of be on the same page and board in terms of where we are headed towards in rest of the presentations that I'm going to do. So we'll wait for a minute and then I'll end the poll. It's about 50 seconds now. Appreciate if you could all participate.
Giri, I just interrupt here. What's the structure, organization, culture, conduct, behavior, and risk culture? How do you link that?
Yeah, so Ravi, I think all of these are interconnected in one way or the other. Uh, so there are certain, I have a slide specifically talking about organizational culture, and then how it touches upon human behavioral cultures, and certain variants of this culture. So a risk culture that is brought up is essentially whether organizations are ready to take certain risk. I had some very good videos to play, but then I think it's not working. So there are a couple of videos I thought I'll showcase to say, how risk cultures are, helping organizations to move to the next level. But I can quote those as I move to the, those slides. Ravi, if you can wait for a couple of slides, I'll do those sessions and answer your questions. Yeah, so yeah, let me end the poll, and we have a, so out of 55 participants, there are about 42 of them said they strongly believe culture is a common denominator among, a strong culture is a common denominator among the most successful companies. So I think this is very good, and I share the same view that, although as inclusion auditors we don't call out a culture audit specifically. I mean, if you have different views, you put it in the chat. We would like to know if you have done some culture audits specifically as a special area, and we could probably even look at having you in some of these sessions going forward, because I have seen in my career in the last 20 plus years, 25 years close to now, calling out a specific culture audit and doing a culture audit requires a lot of support right from the top, and it probably cuts across the organization, cuts across functions, cuts across the leadership and the board. So the mandate really has to come from the top. So so business significance, I want to touch upon a few surveys. This was one of the, PwC Global Culture Survey that was done, and to say what is the organizational culture. The survey was to say, what is the significance of organizational culture. About 3,200 leaders participated in the survey, and almost 72% report that culture helps successful change initiatives happen. And 69% of the organizations that adapted amid the pandemic say culture offers a competitive advantage. 41% feel maintaining community was more difficult during the pandemic, and 77% of the senior management feel connected to the company's purpose versus 54% for everyone else. I think this I have seen consistently across. If you see the last pointer around senior management versus other employees, there has been this particular trend of 80, 77 to 80 to 90% senior management is in some other level, while the rest of the employees are in some other level when it comes to, connected to company's purpose and vision and mission, and those set of things. This gap probably is also the reason that, organizations are not able to achieve what they want to achieve, in the same speed in which the leaders leaders want the company to achieve a growth, or achieve something, huge in terms of, what they want to achieve out of their organization. So 72% report that the culture helps successful change initiatives happen. Now this number also ranges between various surveys that I have seen. It ranges between 72 to about 85%, say that change initiatives require a lot of cultural fitment. And many of the mergers and acquisitions, if you have seen, I think most common factor which, one of the leaders in this, a professor called Ashwath Damodaran, speaks a lot about value and evaluation of companies, and companies that invest in various companies, Fitment and Culture and all that stuff. So one of the underlying factor in any mergers and acquisitions is that the two entities, when they are either getting merged or an entity getting acquired by the other country, entity, the fitment of culture is so very essential. But a lot of times the fitment is seen of culture, people, and all that is seen later on. But more about business and synergies and growth prospects and those kind of things are numbers are given more more relevance and importance. But if you see a lot of big mergers that have happened, either these mergers have not taken the the same outcomes what the two entities thought to be the outcomes, because it has taken significantly large amount of time to merge these entities. Significant amount of time has been spent to kind of synergize efforts, all because there are two sets of organizations which have got two different cultural point of views, and mergers becomes very difficult in such kind of organizations. So this is also true for organizations which are bringing in massive changes in terms of the way they want to operate. Somebody is in a physical mode of delivery and shops and physical mechanism of delivery mechanism, and they are moving all completely to online enabled delivery mechanisms. So e-commerce mechanism, it becomes very difficult to change the mindset of the people from a physical mode to a e-commerce mode. And then there are a lot of examples like this, and more so in organizations which are now completely going digital, with a lot spoken about AI and machine learning and artificial intelligence and disruption. All organizations are looking at one way or the other to digitize most of their efforts, and there are a lot of employees who are at different stages in adoption. With the culture, I would say, is in different stages of adoption. Some of the leaders might be maybe way ahead in terms of thinking, but the entire workforce may not be ready for some of these changes. So while I'm talking about this, I think I would like to touch upon one of the very good interviews that Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, gave back then about I think 5-6 years back, when he had to make a decision about cloud and Azure and very similar business opportunity that Amazon jumped onto. Amazon was completely not in the business of web services, right? AWS came about as a separate vertical and a separate activity, which was nowhere connected to. Amazon was a e-commerce retail giant, and it was doing well. And then they kind of started Prime, and then they kind of started the AWS business. While AWS came much ahead of time, Microsoft didn't even have this in the roadmap. And one of the interviews, so Satya was commenting upon this, that this whole transition of moving from their business that they had known for years, where the margins were very good, and taking this business proposition to the board and asking them to make a shift, which for the future, because it's all about future. They wouldn't make money for a lot many years to come in the in the the cloud business. But then making this proposition to the board, to saying that, hey, we would like to now go for mobile first and cloud first entity from being otherwise, was so very difficult. But then getting the entire organization to back him up and kind of do this whole transformation journey, it's really something very good to hear. And it takes a lot to change the culture as well. So there are certain times when you have to change the culture of the organization from where it is today to catch up with what's happening elsewhere outside the organization. So these are some of the things which very important to understand, that the culture is also there's the importance of change in the culture to for the purpose of growth. So this is one of the survey that I would like to. This is from a Deloitte culture survey. If you would see, this is especially for employees, and the employees were who commented upon to say in this, if you see this particular column, and this column which says I am happy at work and I feel valued by my company, these two, and connected to that the questions around culture. If you see, my company has a distinct culture. Most of the people who reported saying I'm happy at work reported that having a distinct culture for the organizations was about 85% of those people who commented I'm happy at work. I feel valued by the company, again, is about 86% who found that the company has a distinct culture. Similarly, the next survey question was, I can clearly explain my company's culture to my friends and family. Also, you can see the numbers are pretty high. Ability to kind of talk about your company's culture to your family, your friends, and is so very important. Are you able to articulate clearly the culture of the company? The next question was around, my boss speaks to me often about our company's culture. While that has been, the immediate supervisors talking about culture has not been a very immediate touch point. I think this is a really an eye opener for many to say that, while a lot of employees feel connected to the company's culture and they appreciate distinct culture, but the boss is speaking about it more often is not seen as one of the determinant of being happy at work and feeling valued by company. Then we are talking about senior leadership. Regularly communicates my company's core values and beliefs. That's been about 75% and 81%. Senior leadership acts in accordance with the company's core values and beliefs. This is also quite high of 80 and 85%, which is good. So this has been the survey results of exceptional organizations create and sustain a culture that engages and motivates their employees. So this is very essential for companies' overall growth and stature. I would also, this is another slide where I think I would like to spend some time on this. This is more about the business significance, what I would call this as a culture. What makes some companies successful and others not, and what are the characteristics of culture to look for, right? So I have segregated them into the human factor and organizational factor and behavioral factor, and all these are very significant from a business standpoint, from an organization standpoint, and it touches upon organizations in many ways, whether you talk about customer first, your employee first culture. All this, at the end of the day, it's all about stakeholder the value that you would like to create with these messages and the cultures that you want to create within the organization. One of the things I would like to point out here, the human factor. A lot of organizations which have been empathetic towards customers, towards towards employees, towards co-workers, have seen a lot more people stick to the company, lot more customers being with the company or choosing that particular company. Let me give you an example. There are organizations which typically this works. Easy examples would be that if you are taking a flight today from one location to the other, and if you are caught up in some problem, how good the airline companies empathize what you have gone through, and how do they respond to your change requests or your queries, and how do they help you to enable you to do this travel very smoothly with your family. Makes a lot of difference being empathetic. Also, there are a lot of hospitality companies. You would have traveled a lot, you would have stayed in a lot of resorts, you would have stayed in a lot of hotels, and you would distinctly see then there are certain companies, there are certain hospitality companies which are completely different in terms of the attitude, the empathy that they show towards the customer. and the last mile that I say is up to the stage where you kind of go in and come out of that hotel that you feel very good about it. Inclusiveness is another important factor in the culture. The survey says that organizations which have diversity built into the organizations perform way better. Like I mean, at least 28%. And the surveys which I have seen talk about 28% better EBITDAs, better profitabilities than other organizations, not necessarily EBITDA. Um, so being inclusive is the diversity factor is very critical for organizations that are growing and mature companies, as well as a lot have been spoken about building in diversity even in startups. Inclusiveness and diversity not just about people with different genders, inclusiveness of disabled, inclusiveness of people from different geographies, people who come from different cultural backgrounds. And you would have heard about this in many, you would have read about this. Like organizations are totally, the large organizations like Infosys, the TCS, the HCLs, Tech Mahindras. And if you look back 10 years back and now, you have a lot more inclusive, staff. Even when they go and set up offices in other countries, you have a lot more, inclusive staff with these companies. So another human factor is on honest, opinions, honest exchange of opinions and feedbacks mechanism within the organization. This is also very critical. A honest feedback to a reporting helps them to improve what they lack, and at the right time, if you are able to give them the honest feedback and help them shape their career, it's a great thing, and then the chances of them sticking to the company is much more. Similarly, being honest to the customers about something that has gone wrong is very important for them to kind of understand what has happened and stick to your products and your services. Similarly, being transparent about various aspects of the organizational mechanisms of deliveries, engagements and things like that. Every step of the way in terms of the framework, being transparent has been called out to be most important factor in a culture in any organization by various surveys. Building a trust within the framework of both on the customer side, the supplier side, as well as from the employee side. Now, this is very critical, the trust factor. The trust gets built over a period of time, and it is so important to reflect trust across the value chain. And also from a human factor standpoint, how much of your organizations gives you entrepreneurial capabilities to drive something that you choose to drive, to lead something that you would like to lead. And these are very important factors of the culture and also for the organizational growth. Organizations which have embedded entrepreneurial drives within subgroups have really championed this, and have been able to show a lot more value to the stakeholders than those which have not. Also, empowerment. I think it goes along with entrepreneurial drive. Empowerment of people at various levels to make decisions and back them up with decisions. It's so very important. So I could quote one of the very small thing. I was listening to this interview of Amazon CEO then, Bezos, and then he was talking about how they kind of how he listens to every small contributions that are being done in terms of suggestions and recommendations by one of the software engineer at a lower level. Brought up this idea about free shipping many years back. With Prime and without Prime, you have this free shipping. So one of the things he was talking about is, we listen to people, and we kind of validate with the teams, smaller teams, and then it get pushed back and forth. And one good thing he spoke about is, in all of his life, all the decisions that he has made has been not with a lot of analysis and financial analysis performed by his financial teams, but most of them he wouldn't have made if it were to just believe on analytical information. So he said it's mostly about intuition, a gut feeling, kind of things that he believes in, that this will work. And over time, the beauty of entrepreneurs is that if they are making this investment in something that they believe in, very succinctly he was talking about it, that hey, there might be three good investments and 10 bad investments that we make in business. There are a lot of things that we have failed in, and those ones have been made good with these three important business that we have succeeded. So empowering people will bring about a lot of new ideas. This is also about the culture, that you encouraging people to come up with new ideas, and does it get honored? Does it get discussed at various levels? And does it get chosen to be implemented? These are very important factors from a human factor standpoint. From an organizational factor standpoint, I have put down these into a agile company, an organization which is agile, and it adapts itself to a newer way of doing business, and quick in adoption. This is very important. Organizations which are very progressive in thinking, they kind of look at least 3 to 5 years down the line, what would the future look like, and make progressive decisions, and that's what sets them apart from the other organizations. Also, many organizations which are Fortune 500, you would also see that a lot of these companies are very innovative in terms of delivering a service or a product, and they keep changing the way they deliver, the way they innovate. The innovation is built into their the whole stream of service and product deliveries. Adaptable factor is so very important. Being adaptable to the changing environment, able to meet the requirements and exceed the requirements of customers. Sometimes even the customers do not know what exactly they want, and you setting apart as a leader in that particular vertical, and able to take some aggressive stand and decision, and able to meet those customer demands even before they know it is what they want, is what sets them apart. The other factor is also risk-taking capabilities, right? I mean, a lot of organizations which are, when they come to a certain maturity level, they are risk averse to take any new decisions. They don't want to shake up what is already there, their cash cows, the verticals which really feed them. And this is true of when I gave that example about Microsoft shifting from their traditional business of computing to cloud computing and mobile first. There was no money there for the next 5 to 10 years, but this was a decision they had to take to keep their momentum, to keep pace with the things that's happening in the marketplace. So I think it's very important to take the right, take the right amount of risk within the tolerance limits that they have. Also, companies that are opportunistic in terms of taking the right decision at the right time. There is a scarcity that you can, kind of quickly look at and think through, and plan upon. These are very important characteristics in culture. The other aspect is being very strategic and purpose driven. The whole organization, if the mission is clear, if the vision is clear, and purpose driven organizations have a lot more backing of the entire workforce, when they have clarity as to where this is going. And the another set of factors, which I call it as behavioral factors, are all around ethics, integrity, beliefs, value system, attitudes, perception, emotion, and motivation. These are, I think, the underlying factor for the other things to operate. See, you might be very progressive, you might be agile, you might be innovative, but without having a combination of ethics and integrity built into the organization, the culture becomes very weak. It might be short-lived, and you may achieve some things very fast, but then it may not sustain for a long term. I mean, some of the things, like, if you have heard about FTX and things like that, cryptocurrency, the companies which came up with exchanges that came up got short-lived. They started mis-selling and promising to the investors that there'll be a huge advantage in going crypto and things like that, and now you don't hear them at all. So there's a lot of long term cultural fitment in organizations that goes behind decisions, and being progressive and being innovative, that needs to be tied along with ethics, integrity, and a lot of beliefs and value system that you want to create. And a lot of organizations which have these behavioral characteristics of encouraging ethics, integrity, and strong beliefs, which are cultural fitment of beliefs, value systems, and attitudes, do well in long term. So some of the surveys say that at least over a period of I would probably take you to that slide, but over a period of 10 to 11 years, that companies have been studied, with strong cultural organizations have performed almost 900% in the same time, whereas companies that have been validated for the same characteristics of culture, where it has been not a good culture, have just grown about 70%. So you can see the delta of growth differential that is there between 70% and 900% over a 10-year period. So happy to take any questions that you might have. So I will also like to kind of run one of the surveys just before I jump into the other slide. So let me just bring it up. This is the survey number 2. So I appreciate if you could respond to this. The tone at the top is the foundation to set the strong culture within any organization. While I will explain further about tone at the top, but then I think most of the internal auditors today understand tone at the top because it's well spoken of both in COSO frameworks and various forums. We have heard people talk about tone at the top. So we'll give about a minute. It's about 35 seconds.
So, Giri, I have a question here. Just
Sure.
yeah, the stone at the top. Who are the stakeholders? Is it audit committees, shareholders, boards,
Yeah.
top management?
Yeah. I think Ravi translates straight from the board of directors, audit committee, to the CEO and the senior management level. Uh, the tone at the top, setting the tone at the top, many times it is just assigned to the senior management, including CEO and managing director, CEO, and the first line of the senior management. But also many times it's all about the board of directors setting the right context, culture, and setting up the context. Maybe even Puja can comment upon it. Puja had a specific topic on this. How about it, Puja? What is your view?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to shaping the culture of the company, board of directors have a very large role to play. Not just in shaping, and then maybe when it's time for me to speak, I can talk more on that. But then there's a lot of survey that has happened where they say that directors do define their vision, their strategy, their vision. But when it comes to shaping and percolating it down, when it comes to monitoring it, and furthermore, when it comes to taking accountability for the same, that's not there. 19% people only said it's there. The remaining said it's not there. So I think somewhere the board of directors have to take a greater responsibility in terms of shaping the culture of the company and making sure it's being assessed, it's being monitored properly through CEO and from CEO to the management and from management to its employees. So it's basically what the leadership is doing and how it's percolating downwards to others.
So, Ravi, I can give some very specific examples. I'll not quote the company, but then when I was part of some of these meetings where I was part of the internal audit team making presentations to the board, there was this large eye care company which is no more there. I could give this example very clearly. I could see that this company was, the cultural aspect about this is the CEO was very aggressive in terms of growth, in terms of the number of, number of branches they wanted to open, and they were taking way too much of risk compared to the capital that they had. And essentially what it meant is, year one they had about 10 centers, year two they were about 30 center, year three they were about 80 center, year four about 100 centers, and it was like a couple of centers were making profit, and another one third of the centers were making losses. And the audit committee and the board were very concerned about the way this organization was operated. And every time the audit committee, kind of came with a hard stand on saying let's stop this expansion now. Let's put the systems and processes in place. Let's build out everything and clear it out from what are the centers that will be profitable in a year or two, and then make further decisions on growth. While in the board, it was in board and the audit committee, it was all accepted and kind of agreed upon. But the CEO was not stoppable, and somewhere in this whole growth story, I think that's the same thing you would probably see what's happening with Byju's and things like that. When they are, really growing at a very fast pace, even the board of directors don't want to kind of they are also not foreseeing this kind of problems, is what I say. I think they give some leeway to CEOs because they believe the CEOs are the best decision makers, because they are in the in day to day, they know the day to day affairs much more better, and they know the pulse of the organization's capabilities. So they just direct them at times not to do it, but then they don't stop it. So I think this is one of the things which are, I think, answers some of your questions around, do we need to drive this from culture right at the top, and do we need to stop some of these from happening when things go really bad, and do we need to wait till such time? So this survey too, spoke about tone at the top. There are about 65, people out of 82 voted, that tone at the top is the foundation to set the strong culture within the organization. Thanks for responding. And 3 of them responded not sure, none as no. So I think it makes very clear that tone at the top is so significant in terms of setting the context of culture within the organization. It typically flows top down, and somewhere it gets consumed within the middle management and flows down to the lower levels of management. And it's very important that that tone gets set very strongly. The cultural tone gets set right at the top, be it behavioral, ethics, integrity, value systems, perceptions, emotions, and motivation. Whatever factors that we are talking about should get set right at the top, and then gets percolated down. Because no matter what you do down the level, if the strong cultural setup is not there to back you up from the top, it easily fails. So some of these I would like to kind of touch upon. This is a good example of some failed cultural changes and then successful cultural changes. I would like to
Giri, there
cover
are
it.
2 questions, so just to stop it 2 minutes.
Okay.
Being a CFO and head HR, I have been advised to leave the office on time, but not later than 6:37. But still, people want to work beyond the office timings.
Okay. Yeah. So, being a CFO and HR, I've been advised to leave the office on time, not later than 6, but still people want to work beyond office timings. Okay, it's a good question. It's about, again, culture. There was lights of culture, and then there are cultures where work from home culture, hybrid culture, and outcome-based culture. I think this all aligns to what organizations want to do. At the end of the day, I think two things the organizations are worried about as the outcome of all these decisions of, how people would like, the organizational workforce to work. At the end of the day, you need to put your customer first, and at the end of the day, your stakeholders, your customers, and your workforce. The three entities need to work together to really whatever the purpose the organizations are built for. I think these three entities should work together, and it's all about organization. Again, if there are organizations which believe that within 6:37 everybody should move out of the organization, I think there are 4-day working culture, and many have seen, the surveys have seen, like European nations, many companies have done a 4-day working culture, and they have not seen any change in the output of organizations, in terms of work related matters. So it all depends on whether you are able to do things within that time. And there are organizations which work like 12 p.m. in the night, 12 a.m. probably in the night. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about how the managers work together along with their reportings, and how the organization kind of builds that culture of doing the right thing within the right time. So what's your view, Ravi?
Yeah, this is a good question. I had this question last week in one of the meetings. So one of them said people leave on 6 o'clock. I have a team leaves at 9. Somebody saying inefficiency, great capability, etc. So I was a very polite spectator. Then I had to change my tone and said, it's not incapability or inefficiency. It's question of doing it on time and smart work. And obviously, is a burnout. If I can call out in this concept of culture or conduct culture or behavior. So culture is defined, okay, organization, yes, it is defined in certain timings. We work towards the timing. But then from a conduct culture, there is a standard set, okay, this is what the employees have to do. This commitment to employees from the company side saying, yes, you guys have to try to do it so that you leave on time. But then the behavior comes in. So this is very interesting, Giri. I'm just putting some concept there. People have to differentiate here because there's a very interesting between conduct, culture, and behavior. How do you behave? And some employees behave the way they are. And this is the biggest issue. I don't want to name some companies who do this day in and day out. There is definitely a big strain on the employees' culture. And this is the behavior of the individual. So how do we really capture it? And if I'm doing an audit of this, I don't know whether I will call it the right way, but definitely there will be a negative mark against this. This is part of there are 7 or 8 concepts, which one of them is on governance, culture, ethics. This is the second concept. There are 8 or 9 topics which culture audit goes through. And maybe one of the things might be a negative mark against this. This is my view on this. And then I'll have Puja also talk about some of these 8 or 9 topics because these are specific culture audit topics. It's a great talking sense, but then becoming a very nascent area because once this gets captured somewhere and then the assimilation happens and then the further view on this happens and how the audit reports scoring. And there is a lot of methodologies around it. So I'll just stop here because there are a lot of questions around this topic as well. So, and then the next question, just Puja, one more question. In startups, when maybe you can take this question, Puja. In startups, when robust culture is yet to take shape, how would you define their success? Mostly startups associated with hustle and toxic culture.
Sure. So I'll talk on the first thing also. So regarding this late workings and CFO being advised to go home late, etc. So there's no direct answer because sometimes there might be a need of the business to be staying up late. But then in a broader context, very recently, right, just 2 days back, I came across a survey which was done globally, and India ranks highest when it comes to performative work. Okay, and India's ranking was 47%. The second best ranking was Singapore, which was 36%, almost 10% down from India. And when I say performative work, it doesn't mean, high performing work or performance. The definition of performative work is people acting busy than actually being busy, right? So this whole survey, when I was just I'm just when the question came on late night workings, etc., I think that's the culture of India. I mean, the survey says that 47%, it talked about the Asia in general, is very high on performative work, and in Asian countries also India was topping the list. So what I'm trying to say is that, somewhere when you are saying it's a culture of India, it's somewhere it's there in our corporate world also. And we have to see, how do we move away from that? And it said a lot of employees are doing performative work because the leadership expects them to do that. So a lot of people are online because leadership wants them to be online. Many people are not effective in meetings because leadership is focusing on, there are a lot of things, they are focusing on business outcome, but at the same time, leadership is asking them to be more visible. So the survey also said a lot of time is going in meetings where they're presenting their success stories. A lot of times are going in meetings where they are discussing the data again and again. But are they really getting into those meetings where they are taking decisions? Are they really getting into those meetings where that will directly hit business outcome? No. So US rank was pretty low, which is good. I mean, and India was pretty high in the rank. So some of these questions, right, around late workings, flexibility, I think somewhere the leadership also has to set the right culture where employees, put in genuine hours at workplace, and they are more focused on business outcome. So some of the questions were like, is your leadership asking you to be very visible? Despite you contributing heavily to business outcomes, they said yes. Are you having meetings after meetings where you are presenting the same data? They said yes. Are you spending too much of time, talking about your success stories in meetings, then actually making decisions, actually, brainstorming on challenges? The answer was yes. So some of these questions, I think, can be addressed by some of these surveys that happens, and we have to see at a leadership level. I think the CXOs and with the help of some of the good auditors like you guys, I think they have to come up with a culture plan and a culture path to see how they can change it.
So there was a question around startup culture, about being hustle and toxic culture. I think uh, the way the startups are structured is that they are at a phase where they want to they are at a phase where they can either they can live or die, and that I think doing in a very structured manner may not be completely possible. But then there are a lot of organizations which give that flexibility to work around. I mean, they expect you to hustle and be available and uh, be there's a lot of things that they want you to do, and it'll be a small team typically in a startup, which they wear a lot of different hats, and then they would like you to wear different hats at different points in time. But it's again the cultural fitment. It also goes with, are you ready for that kind of hustle with a startup? And it also means that, is everyone in the team of a startup have the same cultural setup as the founders do? And founders might be coming from a different background, but as they kind of grow, this will all fall in some or the other bucket of cultural fitment. But initially, at least a couple of years, there'll be a lot of hustle, and probably you could also call this as a toxic culture at times, because this will be like, be available all the time, and kind of work all the time. So this is very very important question. The slide which I had, in fact, I'll make that presentation. If you have seen this, about this is something which happened in Uber a couple of years back, and you could see that Travis was the CEO. He was asked to step down after a couple of years because of the same toxic culture that he was part of. Yeah, so there are a couple of other questions. Ravi, you want to take some of them? There was a question on, in case of startup companies, how can they ensure the culture when they want to grow faster? I think yes. I think this answers some of the queries that I spoke of. So Ravi, you have any thoughts on this?
Okay, Giri, I think as we go proceed the session, I think Pooja also has some thoughts on that maybe.
Sure. Okay. So does culture mean the same at the individual level, society level, and therefore organizational level? If yes, how can it work uniformly across? Very good question, Narayanan. I think a lot of things that we do come from also from the background, from where we are, what we, what is the cultural background of this particular country, of this particular state, in this particular region, this particular, and there are so many. We are all people, so there is a huge element of people part in this whole culture. But then shaping of this culture once you come inside an organization, a lot of times good culture is also very contagious, I would say. That if you start helping another co-worker during the time when they are in difficult time, they have to meet a deadline, you say, hey guy, I would like to be part of this delivery and let me help you, and that is very contagious. You can see that happening when you are in some problem. They will come back and help you. So these are some of the things I think the organizations will change your perspective of things at an individual level. Even if you come with some certain baggages of the way you work is different, the way you come from the background is different. But when you are in an organization, I think a lot gets shaped up with your co-workers, with your tone at the top, with the cultural setup that you are in. I think a lot of things get shaped up in an organizational culture. So there's enough room for somebody to build a right culture, even if they come from a very, I would say, what do you say? Very, different culture, I would say, cultural background from a geography or, family, society standpoint. Uh, so the next question is on implementing cultural changes in government companies is challenging task. Many government companies need to revamp their organizational culture. Yes, I think it's true that government organizations have a lot more weight to carry in terms of change in culture. I think again it goes from top down, and I have not worked a lot with government companies, but I have seen government companies operate. But it takes a lot to probably move the needle here from organizational cultural change. Any perspective there, Ravi or Pooja, you want to add from your experience?
Right,
I think,
I'll answer this, Pooja. This is a very good question,
sure,
actually.
sir.
And I've seen this happen very closely. I actually have had a lot of discussions with top management on government companies. And as you observe some of these changes, if you see culture, corporate culture, it flows from down at the top, right? And then it's ethics formed, and there are policies, procedures. And an internal audit position is to follow those policies, procedures on ethics, integrity, and then your HR practices. It goes on and on. Okay, each function will have varies between a customer facing and then the product, and finally the internal controls around it. But the important point is, how do we really change it? And it's a very important question, because as government also grows and they become more privatized and all that, this major shift is required from various aspects, because what we see is these are all well-developed companies over a period of time grown so big, but at some point of time, the culture, there is a disconnect because the whole society around them is changing. If we see their stakeholders, especially the employees, there are various stakeholders, buyers, then there are sellers, etc., vendors and shareholders. But the employees are key stakeholders in government companies. They've been there thinking, okay, we will do well. There are government bodies. But this whole ethics governance should change at various points of time. It is very important for them, because if you see the motivation, the salary package, everything should change. So it is a very ingrained thing how this whole thing evolves. And how do you collect information on this? How do you going to put the surveys into play and then collect all these things? Because there are inherent surveys which culture audit can do. And some of these measures will bring out some of these gaps or whatever it is. So just I'll stop here, because there is a big requirement. It is not a challenging task. The governments are thinking about it. There is a lot of privatization going around, talks of mergers, etc. Mergers, and when Giri mentioned about the merger activity, change management, etc., it is bound to happen. It's just a matter of time, because or else the government companies will not be attracting talent. Talent will go into the private sector. And what I saw today, I think some article is governments now recruiting from private. So there is a change in culture itself, the way they talk about it. So it's just a matter of time that this will change. Yes, no cultural change is easy. Okay, it is going to take a lot of time. It will take over 18 to 24 months. Even if you see a change management or merger, it takes a lot of time. New culture comes in, bridging the culture, and there's a culture audit around it. And that's what Giri mentioned. This is a very, very important topic, soft control. It's not a hard control, but you can distinctly see the change in approach, change in culture, change in the employee attitudes, etc. It will come, but very, very important topic. Good question. Puja, yeah. And then one more question on IPPF. Puja, maybe 2 minutes. IPPF, maybe Giri, you can talk on that as well.
Um, IPPF has got a standard. I'll come to that. There's a slide on that, 2110. I have a slide on that, on culture and mandate. So let me share the screen. I'll come to that. Let me just quickly. I think we are almost like, we have got another 45 minutes, and I would like to do some fireside chat with Pooja, and kind of. So let me wrap this up in about 15 minutes, 15-20 minutes. So here I would like to kind of give some examples of failed culture change and successful culture change. Uber, if you have followed their story of growth, they're from nowhere to somewhere. They reached about $10 billion in revenue, and it was a very aggressive and toxic culture. And the CEO was asked to step down, and they brought in a new CEO. It's not that the CEO didn't do well; he did extremely well. But the kind of the reports that came out after the audit of Uber, Travis, I call him Kalnaik. So Travis was the CEO then, and he brought about a lot of it's like what I think Venkat posted, that the startup and toxic culture was was all prevalent there, but the kind of transformation, to bring about a transformation in a business where it is challenged by governments, and it is a space where nobody wants it to be disturbed, and bringing in Uber as a tech business and not like a taxi business, and it brought about a lot of change in the way today we consume service of taxi services, or rental services of taxis, and this was the change that he brought about. But in the process, there was so much of toxic culture built in Uber that eventually the board had to undertake an independent audit, and he had to step down because of various sexual harassment cases, which were kind of swept under the carpet, and there was so much reported, which never, the culture was so bad that they had to ask the CEO to step down. And so the other portion which you have heard about, GE is a very well structured organization. It's one of the talks where Ashwat also talks about, Damodaran speaks about it, that GE is a 125-year-old organization. It's built around bureaucracy and hierarchy. And if you want to now make shift the change in culture to make it very swift and adaptive and agile, it's very difficult. So this is one of the things, like even when organizations becomes 100 and 120 years old, how do you kind of manage the cultural change that you would like to bring to keep pace with the change? It's very difficult, but you need the right kind of leaders and the environment to do it. Sears, again, it was traditional and centralized. It could not come out. It had to shut down. It was a very big retail organizations in the US. While some of the change that you could see on the right side of successful cultural changes, organizations like Microsoft, which became much more collaborative and customer focused and could quickly adapt, even though it's a very old organization from a standpoint of tech. In tech, I think 20 years is considered to be a mature, highly mature, declining company. If they are able to sustain their position as number one, it's a great achievement in tech. And they have been able to agile and adapt, be agile, move into the cloud and mobile first businesses and various other things that they have done. Microsoft 365 is a very good example of cloud adoption, and they are able to invent themselves as they competed against Zoom by launching Teams, and they have done so many new things for a older organization. Netflix again is a company which was which started off probably doing very much like sharing videos and all that, and then finally they got into the net business. They adapted a lot of agile frameworks, and they were very innovative, and so they could sustain themselves in a very competitive market. Zappos, introduced themselves, reintroduced themselves. I think this is a very new, framework of culture called holacracy. It's not holoc. So this is a spelling error. Holacracy is something that you do self-management. It is not driven by set of hierarchies, but it is a group of roles, and the roles perform the activities, and there is no reporting structure like a hierarchy and top-down structures. It's it will be a role-based activity. They'll be given tasks and roles, and then people finish their jobs, and there is nothing to do beyond that. They all manage their self-work, and they drive innovation themselves, because they have been given the authority and responsibility to shape up their particular function, or their sphere of activities. So these are some of the examples, and as I said earlier, there was a study of research from over 11 years, which saw the good cultured organizations versus badly managed cultural organizations. So the shareholder value of well managed corporate culture rose up to 901%, while shareholder value was only about 74%. So it is a long term game that you need to play with culture. It's not a short term, you don't have visibility of culture overnight, but you will get the results over a period of time. And the study also shows the board composed of different cultures perform 35% better than boards that are composed of one culture. So this is also true from some survey that was done. So let me move on to the next slide. This is a slide which I liked from. It was published by Grant Thornton. It's an auditing culture paper that they released, and this kind of pulls out the various moving parts to the whole core belief systems. And in culture, this is very so important, that the control systems, the stories, and the symbols that people can associate with, and the organizational structures, the power structures, and rituals and routines. These all contribute to the core beliefs which the organization have. The beliefs and assumptions are paradigm by which every other aspect of the culture web is viewed, and you will see this in terms of organizations which have been there for a good number of years, and they have got their own tangible symbols and intangible visual representations of the organizations, the logos, the office layout, the procedure, the dress codes. If there are dress codes that are vibrant, and then people like to be seen that way, and then they there are control systems, there are stories that they tell to the organizational workforce that are very encouraging and motivating. And of course, the structures, the roles and responsibilities as outlined in the structural chart guide decision making, delegation, and communication flow. There could be a large organizations which have got geographical structure versus product structure or some other vertical structures, but ultimately these should kind of result in a better management of workforce as well as customers. And there are power structures, which are the key influences within company, the way decision making is conducted. Also, the rituals and routines, the day-to-day behavior and actions of people toward their work, each other, and those outside the work. So these are the very important aspects of core beliefs and the cultural web. I would also, kind of touch upon some aspects of what I call it as culture variants. In some of this conversation, it has already come up. But then, what makes some companies successful and others not? These are characteristics of culture to look for. One variant is like somebody quoted out there in a message, that it's a toxic culture, where you don't like to go to work. You get up. I think there was a survey done on this as well. In India, about 45% of the people don't like to get up and go to work, and then there are some countries where they like to go to work, and it's all about what is your work culture? Is it very toxic that you every day morning you feel tired to even wake up and think about going to work, or you really cherish that kind of, I would like to go to work and meet my co-workers and do my set of activities. Then there are positive cultures. Then there are purpose driven cultures, feedback oriented cultures, where the entire ecosystem of the organization works on a feedback mechanism given on time, whether it be be the employees, be the top down and bottom up feedback systems, and even from customers you get a lot of reviews, you act upon reviews and all that feedback mechanism. A lot of good things come about in mentoring. Organizations who have a good mentoring systems and coaching systems build very good workforce. Accountability, people being accountable for what they do, taking responsibility, and leaders who take responsibility and accountability for what they do. Again, a very good culture in an organization. And then there are control driven culture, which are everything has to be reported back and everything needs to be spoken of in black and white before an action is taken. So all of them have their own repercussions, and the stage in which the company is also makes a lot of difference. If it is a startup, if it is a growing company, if it is an optimized and growing but stable company, or it's a matured company, this is another variant of culture to look for, because then each of these growth stage you have different cultures. So one of the sessions that I saw, they talk about there has to be a different type of CEO at a startup level, there has to be different type of CEO at a growing level, and at a matured level. So it was spoken of to say that there are organizations CEOs who are good fit at a startup level, but they are not they are probably very bad fit when they are matured level. So there needs to be a different level of thinking and a cultural setup in a very large matured organizations. The other variant is about being collaborative, being hierarchical, being adhocracy, which is like self management, result oriented organizations. No matter what, the results are all that matters. It doesn't matter what you do other than that, but if your results, if your results are good, I think everything else is kind of sidelined. A role based leadership driven culture and customer first culture and employee first culture. So many organizations like for example Amazon says we are we are very very customer first, and organizations we are very for us everything is about customers. So for some other organizations like HCL adopted this many years back, saying it's employee first organizations, because employees drive the entire business, and making it employee first, they saw a lot of success. This happened about 10 years back, I think. So various companies have seen different cultures work for them, but it's all again about organization building a cultural setup and backing it up over the years. So let me just run a small survey associated with this. It will be quick. Let me just launch this survey. So this is all about a cultural audit that you would have done or not done. I think it's very important to get a feedback on this, because I think as internal auditors, I've seen we spend a very less time in terms of doing any specific cultural audits. But it's so important that we put a plan in place for cultural audits, more so in the age we are at, where there is Gen Z, then Z, and then you have millennials, and then you have at different levels there are different set of people working in the organizations, baby boomers, and people who are 40 and above, people who are 30 and above, people who are 20 and above. There's a lot of mix of people who are coming into the organizations. Ravi, you would probably have more insight on what works well when you have a mix of people with different age groups. What is your experience around this?
Yeah, Giri, good question. Actually, we've been doing this for the last 2 years, just closely watch the new gen post-COVID. Okay, post-COVID has been a very challenging experience. What is the mindset of the new teams and what are the people wanting to do in office? So it's very interesting experience and some of the things which is being discussed. What do you want from the organization? What do they want to give to the organization? And then a very important point, stress is taken over. A lot of stress related issues have come. We've seen a lot of incidents happening around it. So mental health is also becoming a very important point. So it's a very interesting thing, the way it is organizations are have to evolve, adapt to the new requirements. Client requirements also increasing one side because you have customers doing, okay, I want this product this type just in time, and then you have all these risks around us, flexibility around us. It's a very interesting, challenging time. But one of the things which have stood the test of time, okay, from an organization perspective, whichever organization I come from, is culture. And this culture we always talk about. Giri, you also come from the same organization previously, you were working, and Puja also previously was working with us. It's important to understand we stick to the culture. And culture means basic things, be transparent, be very open about it, help the people grow, treat the family, extended family culture to some of these things because you never know where they're working, or we give them all the freedom, empowerment, etc., etc. So it's a very important shape. And one of the questions I saw in the chat box, just to add, sorry, Puja, cutting into your time, was how do we map the global practices with the local practices? A very, very good question. Yeah, I always like that idea when I don't know who to, I don't know, politics. Think global, do Indian. Okay, that's a very, very important topic. Yes, take the good things out of the global structure. There are processes, policies, ethics, HR practices, blah, blah, blah. You should adopt some of them. There's no choice, but adopt it in a way which suits your organization. Again, geography changes, location changes, organization changes, and can be very specific to certain organizations in the location. So you can't do the same thing what I'm doing in a location in Tamil Nadu to something in the north. Okay, it can vary big time. And this is what is a very important lesson doing culture audits. You just can't say in the use. You good question. Globally, you can. There are good practices, guidance around it. So how do you adapt the behavior of some of the people? Because once you do a culture audit, that's another question coming up in the bottom. How do you do culture audits? Maybe I'll leave to Giri and Puja to take over that question. You need to adapt it to the situation, adapt it to the organization, ask those questions. Answers might vary because organization can be. And this is one of the toughest challenges I've seen culture audits. I think whatever I've done or gone through the last 2, 3 years, the biggest challenge is culture audits. It's no longer straightforward. Every answer will vary. We need to, and there are 8 to 9 topics you need to work on. So maybe Giri has time or Puja can touch upon some of these topics. So thanks, Giri, but a brilliant question from a perspective of how do we really handle situation organization.
Thank you, Ravi. So, this I have performed or have been part of the culture audit. The results are like, most of the participant reported that they have not done or have not been part of the culture audit, which is what I could echo. That very few times you have a special audit called culture audit, and do we get a mandate for that from the board and the top management is a question that we all need to look at. I'll quickly touch upon. I think time constraints. I'll just talk about the mandate and then a few one slide on the framework of audit, how to do cultural audit, so that it serves the purpose of today's webinar. And then I will do a quick fireside chat with Puja to kind of ask her some, the cultural questions that she would probably have answers to, and we can open it up for Q&A from the participants. So yeah, the mandate. Somebody asked, what is a mandate, and what does IIA talk about? So one of the mandates I would like to start is that the study shows that only about 4 to 9% of IIA time is dedicated to culture audit in some form. Okay, so this is what the study shows across many surveys that were done by Big Fours. I've just collaborated all that and made this range of 4 to 9. And only about 23% of auditors confirm to have experience with auditing culture of the organizations, which is far less considering that it's such an important topic and a foundation to the organization's make or break. And, the associations, the organizations die because of culture at times. Almost 80% of auditors responded they don't have or have not planned culture audits in future. So this is interesting from a standpoint of they don't even see that it is planned sometime in the near future. So these surveys, speak aloud about how we treat culture, which is fundamental to the organization from an audit perspective. So the mandate typically comes from a performance standard called 2110 governance standard. And it talks about internal audit activity must assess. This is about IPPF. Someone had a question on IPPF. The IPPF refers to internal audit activity must assess and make appropriate recommendations to improve organization's governance process for promoting appropriate ethics and values within the organization. So this is where a portion of the mandate we get as far as the standard is concerned. There are various other things also embedded into this: make strategic and operational decisions, overseeing risk management and control, ensuring effective organizational performance management and accountability, communicating risk and control information to appropriate areas of the organizations, and coordinating the activities of and communicating information among the board, external and internal auditors, other assurance providers, and management. Altogether, this is packaged under the governance 2110 standard for performance. And I think this takes shape from the cultural audit will take shape from this standard. And also, if you have seen the COSO internal control framework, the principle one, the organization demonstrate commitment to integrity and ethical values. I'll just show you that slider as well. This is a lot of, there are about 6 different dimensions, which, anybody who's done internal financial control assessments and SOX work, they would know this, that the entity level controls flows typically from a COSO ICF, and it has given some, 5 dimensions, about 17 principles associated with it. And if you kind of do this part of the audit, I think partially will cover most of the cultural part of the organizations, be it from ethics, integrity, whistleblower, sexual harassment policy framework standpoint, and board minutes, meetings, and all that you have to look into, and then report on design and implementation of a framework of culture gets embedded into those assessments. Not in its entirety, but at least you'll get some comfort that the entity level controls are passing or failing. If the board doesn't have any independent directors, or independent directors are not really independent, so you need to comment upon it. If there are not adequate mix of directors in the board, gender diversity or the diversity is not there. Some of these are mandated by SEBI and various institutions that listed companies are associated with. So some of these are built into the framework of regulation, that you need to have diversity, where the culture also gets built into this. But others are all driven through individual mandate of the organizations, the board compositions, the way they meet, what they discuss, what do they talk about. All of that is in the board minutes. When you look into it, you can probably look into what aspects of culture you want to assess and document, looking at the board minutes. So the mandate for a typical specific cultural audit comes from the board or the audit committee typically, because these are the same people or the investors. These are the two important groups of people who can mandate an cultural audit, because it requires some backing of budgets for this, which are probably not part of your overall internal audit budget as such. That's why probably it is not spoken of in terms of a separate activity. So if this needs to be there, it needs to be embedded into your internal audit charter and a plan, and that's the way to take it forward. Now, here I would, typically, if you look at the cultural audit, it falls under these 3 buckets of audits. One is the framework audit, where it is more about assessment of the design of the cultural, aspects of the organizations. Do you have things in place? to make a good culture operate, nurture, grow in the organization. The second is about cultural assessment, which is more about assessing the design and implementation reviews. Here it takes the form of surveys and things like that, which are typically done. It's a mix of interviews and surveys that the cultural assessments are done. And most probably, most of the organizations that I have come across through various interactions, they have adopted the cultural assessment as a survey and interview process, because this gives them a way to kind of interview the top leadership and understand what they are thinking and document it, because it will be face to face with top leadership, with the board of directors, with the audit committee chairs, with the CEO. You sit and discuss about a lot of questionnaires that are there around culture of the organizations and get individual inputs, and then run a survey on this and then get their feedback, which will ultimately show you where are the weak links and where you need to focus on. And the third, the one which I really love to kind of adopt, I mean, I have not done this honestly, but going through the cultural audit and things, what I've seen, I think embedding into this cultural aspect of an audit into your routine audits, it may probably give you a fantastic result, in the sense that, if you start now mapping, there are a lot of in an internal audit report, you do a lot of mapping in terms of 5 C's, like the consequence, the criteria, consequence, root cause, impact, recommendations. You have all this as part of your audit. If you could fit in the from a root cause standpoint, there are a lot of ways you kind of report a root cause. There are root causes which are people, process, technology, which are a problem that you kind of identify. But if you could embed a cultural part of what things are going wrong, suppose you take a very good example of saying a repetitive, defect in a particular area, say purchase department always flouts on certain policies that are being put in, and this is probably, you can map it to one of the cultural, you can probably tag it into a cultural bit, that this function is always defiant, this function is always very difficult to work with from a standpoint of cultural fitment from an overall organizations. You can tag particular observations with a tag of culture associated with that function, that particular area of audit, without being too personal. If you could bring about that change in the organization, I think it will add a lot of value to the points that you're bringing up, because typically internal audit covers almost all parts of the organizations, be it strategic, I mean, not so much on strategic, but still there are a lot of organizations which encourage strategic directional inputs from internal auditors, more so in operational side and financial side and fraud prevention side. There's a lot of focus by the CEO, CFOs and CEOs, that they look at internal auditors to kind of do their bit of contributions and raise this control lapses much ahead of any whistleblower could. And bringing in the cultural aspect to your entire audit might help shape up your enterprise tone at the top, at the right kind of tone at the top, and the organizations below. You might be able to be able to make the difference through this audit. So some of the things I would like to point out here, this is one kind of framework which I picked up from PwC's auditing risk culture framework. It's a framework for behavioral reinforcers, and there are multiple dimensions that are put in here: the leadership action, the communication, the people practices, performance management and reward, organizational structure and external environment. And all of these have got different dimensions for us to, as internal auditors, to look at and embed into our framework of audit. Typically from a standpoint of, these will all contribute to the culture of the organization, and how these things are being handled and what is the focus on this. Take for example talent management, take for example performance measures, your recruitment and onboarding strategy, and various other aspects which are centered around what kind of people you recruit, what kind of performance measures you have within the organization to reward the right set of people, and linkage to reward, calibrations and behavioral measures, and all these are so very important. So this is one of the way you can assess the framework built around culture with all this dimensional assessment. And of course, you have this, which I wanted to touch upon, the first layer which you see on the top. This is the COSO internal control framework, assessment that typically gets done as part of internal financial controls, or SOX audits. Typically have this as well, and many of these are getting now driven down to internal audit as well. To many organizations, internal audit, the first set of activities is to kind of assess the control environment around each process, each function that you are going to audit. This can be replicated across processes, across functions. It need not be only at entity level. You can embed this into each of the process, sub-process level, to understand what is the commitment to integrity and ethics value within that particular process or function. And these are the 5 important principles that COSO talks about: the demonstration of commitment to integrity and ethical values, exercise oversight responsibility by the board, establishment of organization structure, authority and responsibility, demonstration of commitment to competence, and enforcing accountability. And each of these has got its own focus areas. And these principles have got about 17, 18 focus areas which touch upon what you mean by each of these principles, and these all get assessed again from an entity level control standpoint, and these are some of the feeders for cultural assessment. So I think I had some videos to play, but I will share this presentation with the larger audience so that you can go through this. There are very good talks from Ashwath Damodaran, who talks about loss of valuation, and how he sees organizations, like different organizations in different levels of stages of growth, acting in very different way, and losing customer and losing customers and stakeholder value. Similarly, there is a very good conversation with Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos and Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO. I'll send this across in once this webinar is done. We'll circulate this presentation as well. So so I'll just kind of have some questions to Puja. Can I start that? Ravi, you want to add something here before I start?
Yeah, Puja, there are some questions on the chat box. Can you look at it and answer some of them? These are very interesting questions for you. Maybe before
we can go ahead and then I'll cover all the questions in the chat box, sir, once
okay.
We start answering.
Giri, you can start the thing.
Yeah, so
I have gone through the questions in chat box, so I can just go and address them one by one.
Yeah, maybe we can do about 10 minutes of this session, Puja. I wanted to have some specific questions. You coming from both industry now, sure, and you worked in consulting earlier. So one is about overall what you have to say about culture and its importance. I mean, from what we discussed today, and if you could add 2 lines around what do you think, being in this talking to a lot of customers and a lot of global assignments that you have done, I'd like to understand what do you think about culture and its importance.
Yeah, I think we have spent a good 1.5 hours, talking about culture and its importance. So just few points that I would want to reiterate is, I think there is a great power in culture. A good culture can sustain a company in the long run, and a poor culture can impact the sustainability also. And very surprising, Giri, I just saw the survey where you said 80% of the auditors don't have a plan to perform an audit in future. I think that's though I'm not surprised, because I know they don't, but then I think it's high time they should start gearing up towards that, because you have shared some surveys, and some of the surveys that has been done by Big Four, right, across 3,300 employees across 106 countries. They were asked, what is the most important issue that they face today? during COVID era, post-COVID era, when there were so many fraud, happening from within the employees, within the organization. So they were asked, what is the most important issue they face? Is it leadership? Is it workforce capability? Is it performance management? And there were a lot of host of other issues that we currently face in our day-to-day life. And the one that ranked the topmost was culture. So CX, so everybody is like worrying about, how do we address this cultural issue that we are facing today? A lot of malpractices happening, money laundering happening within the organization. So I mean, you look at any change in the organization, right? Whether it's merger or acquisition, whether it's strategic change, whether it's responding to a regulatory environment, whether you are pursuing a critical talent, which we have been doing. Last year, we saw a huge turnover of talent right across India. So whether we are pursuing a talent, culture is the crux of change. So if you're not able to, merge culture or align culture with all the changes that's happening around you, I think you will not sustain in the long run. So I think culture is very important.
Yeah, so Puja, one of the important other thing is how do we kind of measure the indices of culture? I mean, do you have a measurement metrics around this?
So Giri, so what happened is, again, coming back to your auditor survey, right? It is very daunting for auditors or even the CXO to think that, how do we measure something as vague as culture, right? But if you look at it, if you go back 20 years from now, in some bits and pieces, we have been doing a part of culture audit, maybe not to the extent we should be doing. But once Enron happened and once, SOX came into being, risk management, SOX came into being, they talked about risk-based approach. We started looking at tone at the top, HR policies, whistleblower policies, audit committee meetings, minutes of the board meetings, the tone at the top, power dynamics at the top. What are the HR policies? So we have been doing a culture audit in a subset way. We are doing a subset of culture audit. Nowadays, larger companies are also having conduct risk committee. Whose idea is to implement culture and do constant audit around the culture of the organization. So I wouldn't say it's a black box now. It's not, cultural audit is not a black box. It's quite unfolded now. Now, while the measure might vary from company to company, but the themes remain the same, right? The common underlying theme of any good culture would be shared belief, innovation and change, risk assessment and management, collective focus, courage, commitment, inclusion. So what I'm trying to say is that, while people may feel daunted by how do we measure culture, but the underlying theme remains the same of a good, strong culture, right? You think of Tata. What are the things that, when you talk about the Tatas, right? Things that come to your mind is very strong ethical practices, very strong innovation and change team, very strong leadership. Overall, a very strong foundation, right? So even if you look at Fortune 500 companies, you just talked about Fortune 500 companies and few things that they've had. I will take it a step further, Giri, right? You had some companies in the Fortune 500 list in 1955. Do they still exist in the list? No, many of them don't exist in the list. In fact, only 10% to 11% of the companies that existed in the list in 1955 continue to exist today. So that means, 90 companies out of 100 are fizzling out over time. Either they are just fizzling out, they don't exist anymore, or they are not in the top 500, right? We talked about Amazon, Facebook, they are all very new. They are having a strong culture, but they are all very new. But think about those companies who are there in Fortune 500 list for over so many years, 60, 70 years. And I think the differentiating factor as per various research has been culture. So ability to adapt to market changes, ability to get the right impression to the customer, ability to get the right feedback from the shareholders on their culture, ability to establish transparency with their shareholders, ability to not just frame the cultural policies, but also percolate it downwards. The employee should be able to relate to it. You showed a slide on commitment of the employees. Do they feel committed? Do they feel valued in the organization? Right? It's all culture. It's all a part of culture. So ability to kind of make employee a part of the organization and align to their value system. Now, if as an organization, I believe in theft, malpractices, if I believe in money laundering, and as an employee, if I don't relate to the value system, I leave the organization. There is a behavioral aspect to it also. So primarily, I think when we are measuring culture, I think We need to have these underlying themes of your core value system, your differentiating value system, and then come down to more specific. It's like any other audit. What could go wrong? Right. So what does courage mean? What do you mean by, employee having courage in the organization? Now, if there is an ethical dilemma, are they able to raise it? If something has already been raised, how much is the company addressing it? How much is the board of directors going through some of those hotline calls? How much are they, going through the incident reporting report to address the issue? How engaged is the board of director? So what I'm trying to say is that measure may vary from company to company, but the underlying value system remains the same. Which is around shared belief, which is around, collective focus. There are no individual heroes, right? In any organization, there is no individual hero. The organization works with several people. So how are you going to have a collective control? How are message going to the collective whole? How are people working? What is the people's attitude towards teamwork? How are they working collectively? So collective focus, shared value system, shared belief, risk posture of the organization, collective risk posture of the organization, and then some of the behavioral aspect that you talked about, right? Commitment, courage, inclusion, tone at the top, power dynamics at the top. I think power dynamics at the top plays a very important role. If board of directors are fighting, if there are too many constraints on the CEO, a lot of pressures on the CEO, incentivization around the CEO, then that's how he would, the same pressure, the same incentivization would go to his management and then to the people. So we have to be very careful in some of those things. So what I'm trying to say is that don't be daunted. I think auditors and even the CXO should not be daunted, saying that, culture is a very vague term. There is a way of doing it. And I think they have to just break down their core value system, go further down, look at what can go wrong. Look at various departments within the organization, their HR department, their compliance department, their legal department, their internal controls department, their front office, their operational department, their technology department, and how cultural, aspects are running across these departments in terms of surveillance, in terms of control posture, in terms of ethical practices, in terms of communication. I think HR plays a very important role in all of this too. So what are the HR policies?
Does board of directors also play a major role in this whole? What is your experience of board, role of the board, and what kind of things you have seen that top down?
Yeah. So right. So I think I briefly touched upon it. When Ravi sir had a question on board of directors, and then we had a question on the chat box also. I think role of directors have to take the board of directors have to take greater responsibility when it comes to shaping and monitoring culture. There have been several surveys where people have said that they do define their vision statement, they do define their mission statement, but that when it comes to actually living it or actioning it, they fail to do so.
So one survey, in fact, said that 86% of the board believed that culture is so very important, but when it came to execution and implementation and the board's oversight on that, only about 24% saw that this is actually getting implemented. So I think there is a big difference between this as well.
Yeah, and Giridhar, somewhere people are feeling it too, right? People are feeling it. So because you have people who say that board of directors are not doing it, we want more commitment from board in building a strong culture. So I think some of the things that board of directors can do is getting an outside view. So there are some people who have access to board of directors, right? But they are their views on company's culture. So that way they will get some outside view. Secondly, what they can do is, giving a message from time to time on culture building to the people. So how engaged they are. It's not like, beginning of the year in goal setting, you establish few things and then you just forget about it in the future, right? So how is the messaging going from time to time on culture building? Then when they develop business model and strategy, when you're developing business model and strategy, are you even considering that if the culture fails, how would your business model or strategy fail?
Right.
So again, what could go wrong, right? We are talking about defining culture, etc., etc. But what about the other way around? Are you ever thinking that, are you, from a risk assessment perspective, are you seeing that what if the culture fails? What if the desired culture and the actual culture is not aligned? Right. So do you think the business strategy and the business model will fail? I think those are very important questions that the board should ask. Then few things about I touched upon, like constraints and pressure to CEO, right? What kind of pressure are you building on CEO? Because at the same time, if a CEO has some incentive to do fraud because of certain pressures that the board is upon them, the same would go in the rest of the company. And then once the company fails, the regulators come into picture, the whole economy fails. So what are they doing in terms of the messaging to the CEO? Then the monitoring aspects, right? How do they obtain and brainstorm? You talked about independent survey. Ravi sir talked about independent surveys, right? So how are they brainstorming on those surveys? How important are they placing to some of the hotline calls, right? When the board is asking information from the management, what is the spirit? Is it to seek transparency, or are they trying to put blame on the management? What are the specific matrix that they have defined from a cultural standpoint? So I think all of these things play a very important role, and it has to come from the board. There's nobody else who can take it up. And where board fails a lot is accountability. What is their track record of being transparent with their shareholders? Are they seeking feedback from the shareholders? Are they asking it what kind of culture they want for the company? And are they giving them enough information on the culture that they are currently having in the company? So accountability, transparency, all the playing control in building the whole culture, in monitoring the whole culture, in setting up the tone at the top, in assessing the culture, and then making company very strong.
Hey, thanks, Puja, for those feedbacks and the things that you have really shared. I think it make a lot of sense. I'll just run two surveys that I have while we continue to kind of look at some of the questions that are there. So this survey question is more about, should internal audit perform culture audit? Is it a HR function? Is it because I have been speaking to gentleman who is a doctorate PhD in HR in lean management. So sometimes it is felt that HR, this is a HR domain, it is a HR area, and so they felt that it is an area where they have been doing some bit of cultural audit themselves from a HR standpoint. So essentially, is it an internal audit area? Is it a HR area to look at and kind of the mandate is by the HR to get this done and not necessarily with internal audit. So this has been one of the interesting questions when I was speaking this morning. This gentleman who worked with a big pharma company and was involved in a cultural assessment, he said it was a mandate with the HR. So I just thought it's good to know what participants think, whether internal audit should perform cultural audit, or is it a HR domain and somebody else should perform it. Okay.
So Puja can answer some of these questions. Puja, any inputs? How are you doing it in your organization? How are you practicing it? Any inputs from a global organization?
HR plays a very important role when it comes to talent hiring, when it comes to remuneration. So I think they play a very important role in terms of talent retention, hiring, remuneration. But definitely, I think the auditors have a bigger role to play. Board of directors have a bigger role to play. But having said that, I feel that organizations' remuneration philosophy and framework, in particular the incentive, has a very, very substantial influence on the behaviors and decision making of people. So I'll give you an example from home. I know we don't have time, but then on a lighter note, right? Every time my son finishes his food, he wants a piece of chocolate. Right. So he's a very fussy eater. So I have to give him chocolate for him to finish his food. So that's the incentive I'm giving him. But at the same time, if I give him too much of chocolate, he ends up with a root canal. Right. So what I'm trying to say is that, the way we behave, the way we take decisions is remuneration plays a very important role. The incentives play a very important role. But at the same time, we have to be very careful. Always reward-based incentive will not work. It can be counterproductive for the culture of the organization. For example, if I keep giving chocolates to my son, it will not work always. So I think HR plays a very important role. Remuneration,
Puja, you're breaking up. So as Puja.
It's not all of I think it should.
So is Puja breaking up?
Yeah, looks like she's breaking.
Am I audible?
Yeah, breaking up.
Puja, you're breaking up.
Giri?
Yeah. So yeah, so this survey 80% said it is internal audit's domain to perform culture audit, which is good to know. I'll just run the final survey of the poll. 1 second. So let me just bring that up. Does your current or future next 2 to 3 years audit plan include culture audit? This is
I
an
think
interesting question I wanted to pose.
audible now.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we can hear, but still you're breaking up a bit.
So one
Puja?
question, Pooja, you are mentioning too much on HR. There's culture audit on board members. There is culture audit on various activities, right? It's just not one. So what's the take between you and Giri can answer this? What's the take on corporate governance, etc., culture audit?
Sorry, Ravi, I think we are losing Pooja.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
Giri, you should take this question on corporate governance on tone at the top.
Right. So
Culture
what's the
audit.
question? Sorry, I didn't hear the
Culture
question.
audit on tone at the top, because there's one very dicey question which has been raised by regulators. What's the tone of top culture on governance, on top management itself?
Right, right. I think there are enough a framework around governance that we can touch upon. Like, as internal auditors, if you follow a framework of internal controls, there's already an assessment on governance through entity level controls, and then there are regulators who have if you are highly regulated financial services industry, you go through this a lot of places where you need to be compliant with some framework of governance on ownership and various other things. So I think it is the tone at the top, culture, governance are all closely tied up in various forms. But then is regulators playing a role into the culture and through the governance framework? I'm not very sure. Maybe Ravi, you can comment upon it. Will regulators have a play through certain form to set the culture of the organization through the governance framework, where they mandate, say, for example, a defense organization has the defense suppliers need to have certain board compositions which are very different from other organizations. So through these are the regulators controlling who can be in the board of the organization. So in turn, controlling the culture of the organization. These are very important tangents or variants of how regulators play a role in shaping up an organization's culture. But I think these are in multiple dimensions. So Puja, in banking, do you have any dimension of in banking? How does it work? And I think we lost it. Okay, Puja, do
Yeah,
you
I
have
think
any
Giri
dimension
in
of regulators, and can you comment upon SVB's financial fall and kind of things that happened with Silicon Valley Bank and regulators jumping in and kind of shaping it up, somebody taking over and the company Credit Suisse fall and UBS taking over and things like that. Will it now regulators, do they play a role sitting in the board and changing the construct of the culture?
Yeah, so there are though there is no prescriptive regulation as such, but then in every form. And I'm audible now. Am I breaking or I'm fine? Just want to make sure everybody's able. Okay.
You're
So
okay.
what I'm saying is, regulators, there's no prescriptive regulation saying that culture audit should be performed or every company must perform a culture audit. But I think in every possible ways there are regulations to kind of make sure that some sort of at the top check is there. For example, when you talk about third-party assurance, they talk about principal commitments. A lot of regulators, for example, in COSO group of 30, G30 paper, Financial Stability Board, they have all increased focus on risk culture in the recent years, right? And they have been an increased awareness that organizations should be addressing some of the cultural challenges. So yes, I think regulators indirectly, even though they don't say it should be a culture audit, but all these big regulators, whether it is CFTC, and I'm talking from banking perspective, right? Commodity Future Trading Commission or Department of Justice or Federal Reserve Bank or Financial Conduct Authority or FB, OCCC, they have been showing greater interest in financial stability. So recently we had an article from IMF where this financial leaders must take values as seriously as valuation and culture as seriously as capital. Then Office of they recently OCC said that we expect banks and federal savings associations to have good controls in place so that employees to the highest standard of conduct. Time we are having some from OCC.
So Puja, you're breaking up a bit.
From OCC, some directors from FRB, FSB, and other regulators giving. And there are a lot of large corporates who want to get into financial sector. There are a lot of large corporates who wants to operate bank, but RBI and SEBI and other regulators are not allowing them to do so. And the reason is primarily culture. So you are already a large institution, and what if you start, taking the funds from the public and diverting it to your own company? So some of these things are happening. While I deal with bank and FSI sector, regulators are having their apprehensions around culture when they are stopping these big financial institutions from entering bank. Or from entering into financial dealings. The reason is that they know, that would the culture would be such that it would impact the organization, impact the shareholders, impact the customers, and also impact the economy. But I think regulators have realized culture is important. There are laws, AML laws, anti-money laundering laws. There are a lot of laws around risk assessment. So regulators are realizing, and they are trying to pull the leash. They are trying to control the companies in lines with certain directives that they have in line.
Hey, thanks, Puja, for sharing your views on various topics, right from board of directors to regulators and the risk culture. The last survey that I ran was on does your current or future next 2 to 3 years internal audit plan include cultural audit? A good overwhelming response was about 37% of participants out of about 50 odd said yes, they do have this as part of their plan or they are doing currently. About 26% responded that they don't have or not sure about 37%. So totally about 40-60 kind of spread. 40% have it in the current or they have a vision, plan of doing this audit, and about 60% are not sure or they don't do cultural audit or they don't have a plan to do the cultural audit. It's a good mix actually. When you compare global numbers as well, it's hardly about 26-30% of people that have a specific audit as culture audit. That's a number, and it closely matches with what we have seen with the participants here. I will hand it back to Ravi. Ravi, you would want to do some closing notes and probably answer some questions someone might have. And
I think thanks, Giri. I think a very good session. Thanks, Giri and Puja. Puja, for your interesting insights on financial services. But one or two comments, guys, because this was an interesting session. But as I keep repeating, culture audit is new concept right across the globe. A lot of steps are being implemented in various ways. It's not HR by itself. It has a lot of other components. I talked about governance. Puja talked about regulators. Giri mentioned about various other things as well. But the most important thing is one of the things I just need to close it on. How does internal audit play a key role? And I've been doing some transformation journeys for some of my clients. And these transformation journeys, which Puja rightly put it, there's a lot of culture in it. Without the culture aspect, if I start doing a transformation journey, it's not been a great experience. And internal audit, as we go from your traditional to continuous control monitoring to analytics and various other things, what I keep noting down is this whole culture, which again, Puja mentioned about how this whole global organization are adapting to it, how global organizations are looking global. I had a question on global and local. So how do we really move this around? And so it's very important, risk culture, she mentioned, right? Risk culture itself is a topic by itself. HR culture is a topic by itself. Corporate governance culture is a topic. So there's 7 or 8 culture topics which we need to go through in detail. Unfortunately, I couldn't get Puja too much time here, but we'll have a separate session. Puja and Giri was quite brilliant in giving instances. But the maturity of the organization before you do an culture audit. This has been the biggest worry for me in the last few months when I'm doing this IIA transformation. Is the organization ready for the transformation? And the basic issue coming out, now I had an answer when we did a lot of research, the culture of the organization, the people who go with it, the stakeholders, the business stakeholders, very, very key people, the product around it, the process around it, and really driving it. So it's a very important concept for the day. There are questions on measurement, there are questions on models, etc., which we can talk about. Any questions, pass it back to us. We will pass it back to Puja or Giri. And thanks once again for the patient hearing. Sorry, Puja, we had to run a bit late, about 10, 12 minutes. But such a brilliant session and a very important concept topic for me personally, because that's why I picked this topic, and we'll do 2 more or 3 more sessions because of the risk modeling, the risk methodology. And one question was, how much is the time frame within which this has to be done? This is a very, very difficult topic. If people have done the integration approach or merger amalgamations or new organizations coming into play, these are culture is the basic factor. You're not attacking anything on process, data, etc. The culture becomes the biggest change. So culture change, culture moving to new cultures, adapting, marrying both the cultures, getting on a single platform. And so it's a very interesting topic, continues to be a very important role. I think more internal audits over a period of time will get into culture. It has to be done in various ways, no silo approach. It has to be inbuilt into RCMs. So thanks once again, and thanks once again, Puja and Giri, for hosting a brilliant session. And stay in touch, members. We have this recorded somewhere. If you have questions, pass it back to us, and have a great day. And have a great weekend. I'm just not cutting the weekend. Tomorrow is still one day to go, but thanks once again. Thanks for hosting Saravanan and other guests on the IIA chapter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for patiently listening. It was a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thanks, Puja. Thanks, Giri.
Thank you.
Thanks Ravi.
Everybody.
Thank you, Puja. Thank you, Sharanan.